Phil, could we start with you telling us a little bit about your early life and how you ended up becoming an economist?
Yeah, I grew up mainly in the Ranella-McLaren area south of Adelaide, stone's throw away from the oldest winery in Australia, the Ranella Winery. So at that time it wasn't a built-out area like it is now. There was lots of grapevines around and lots of agriculture in the neighbourhood. And I had an uncle who was actually the farm manager at the Roseworthy Agricultural College up near Gawler, north of Adelaide. So I spent most of my summers up there with him, traipsing around behind Uncle Ray, and sort of developed a passion for agriculture. So went in to do an agricultural science degree at the Wade Institute, and majored in horticulture and biochemistry, and had every intention of going into the wine industry. And in my fourth year took one economics course, or ag economics course, and was ruined for the rest of my life. So I finished off the ag science degree and went down and did both an undergraduate degree in economics and a master's degree in ag science, but with a focus on agricultural economics, under the joint supervision of Bob Linder and Frank Jarrett. So Frank in those days had a remarkable capability to pull money out of a hat, and so I got a wool scholarship, wool board scholarship, and that funded a thesis that I did on the adoption of trace element technology, actually applying and modifying a little bit some of the methodology that Zvi Grilikus had pioneered in the US. And the link there was that Bob Linder, my supervisor, did his studies at the University of Minnesota, but spent some time in Chicago, and they had a reciprocity arrangement where you could take courses in Chicago, which would count for your degree in Minnesota. And so Bob actually got to work directly with Zvi during that time. I got to know him, and so that gave rise to that early work, which I then carried on and developed a very strong interest in the economics of research and development and technical change and productivity growth, and carried that interest through for my whole career. So obviously broadened out the subject matter focus over the years, but that initial passion was, I think, the seeds of it were sown by Bob and Frank, and in those years they were doing their early work on looking at supply shifting consequences for estimating the returns to research, and sort of parallel and pivotal and divergent supply shifts whilst I was doing my master's degree. And I can remember vividly too my very first, for folks who know Adelaide, I know the Wade Institute up in the foothills, and the economics department was downtown in North Terrace. My very first day as a master's student in economics, I was settling myself into my office, and this guy walked in with mutton chop sideboards and said, "Hey, you the new bloke in town?" To which I said yes, and he said, "Follow me." So we walked out of the campus and along North Terrace and into Adelaide Oval, and I spent my first day sipping beers with Jeff Harcourt on the outskirts of the Adelaide Oval, watching a cricket match. And although we had very diametrically opposed views about economics, Jeff was a total salt of the earth, and was a great colleague. And in those days at Adelaide, I watched Al Watson, was also an Adelaide graduate, and they were a really special time in Adelaide. They had, still do have a tea room there, and there weren't that many graduate students, and the graduate students were effectively treated as de facto faculty in many respects. And so there used to be morning and afternoon cuppers, and Jeff was a dyed-in-the-wool Labor Party supporter, and it was in the days of Gough Whitlam and the Vietnam War demonstrations and so forth. So I think Jeff was in the midst of all of that. So he was both a great economist but also a really engaged individual. And I think I recall at least twice one of his mates came along to sit around that tea table and have chats with us, and that was Bob Hawke, who walked in and legitimately said, "Okay, what's up? What's the latest in economics?" He was really, I can remember those times pretty vividly. But we had folks like Sir John Hicks and Joan Robinson, and just a big cast of people came through Adelaide, and were really inspiring. And I thought sort of got people's focus above the domains of Australia and thinking about sort of international engagement. And so it was thinking along those lines led me to think that I would like to do some study overseas, and applied to several places, all in the US.
Why the US? Why was the focus that?
I don't know. I felt like, because I was coming from ag science and I had sort of, although I'd completed a Bachelor of Economics, I felt like I really wanted a much more solid dose of coursework at the graduate level. And both Bob and Frank were trained in the US, and others that I ran across were trained in the US, and I was pretty impressed with their level of economics and the style of economics that they taught and espoused. So that was sort of directed me towards the US. Mm. Ended up in Minnesota, barely knowing where it was on the map, and walked off the plane and was met by George Norton, who at that time was studying here and was doing a lot of work with another Australian called Jeff Davis, who sort of, and it was in the days when you still wrote letters. This was pre-internet, and so I corresponded for quite a few months with Jeff Davis before I came here, just to sort of get ready to come away for graduate school. And in those days, it was a pretty special time at Minnesota. So that was 1979 through to '84 when I was here.